welcome along to the Property Academy podcast by Opus Partners. I'm your host, Steve McKnight.
I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today on the show, we are doing a TradeMe Teardown. We are looking at all of the mistakes that Kiwi property investors are making when renting out their properties. So what I've found are a selection of the worst offenders on TradeMe. So TradeMe listings that have been hanging around there. No tenants want these places. And we're going to talk about what we are seeing and what Kiwis can do to improve the outcomes for their properties. So this is going to be really useful if you are renting out a property or even if you are looking at the potential to renovate properties as well. Now, the first one that I've been looking at is a 3-bedroom property in Mangere Bridge, which is up in Auckland. It's being rented for $610 per week. But here's the thing. It was listed in early December, Friday the 2nd of December, and we're sitting here recording 3 months later, and this property is without a tenant, and it has been sitting empty since about early January.
And isn't this interesting that this is with Barfin & Thompson? So they've got a reputable property manager there, and it's cheap, $610 a week in Auckland's very cheap.
Well, I've already looked at every single property in Mangere Bridge, and if we go in, and I'll just show you, for everybody on YouTube, you'll be able to see this. For everybody on the podcast, I'll just explain it. I was going to say audibly. Is that the right word, Andrew?
Yeah, I think it is audibly.
Audibly. So if we look at 3-bedroom properties in Mangere Bridge, there are 18 at the moment, and we can see that this one is by far the cheapest one at $610. The next most affordable 3-bedroom property in the suburb is about $80 more expensive, and yet this property is still without a tenant. I've checked the Barfin & Thompson website. Nobody wants it. So, Andrew, looking at this, what are some things that you are picking up in terms of why this property isn't renting?
So I can tell you now, this is Ilse's dream house. It is just looking old and tired. It looks dark. It looks damp. It looks dated.
Yeah, some things that I'm picking up. You look at those light fittings, and for everybody listening to this, do you remember in your grandma's house that it's got like the lampshades are like in the shape of flowers?
Yeah.
Because that was all the rage back in the 60s and 70s. And those kinds of things just date a house. Same with these doors where they're just pretty much plain wood. Whenever you see that, it makes me think of the 70s because that was all the rage back then. Some other things I'm picking up is that when they've taken the photos for this house, they've left all the lights off. And that means that it feels really dark. Now, if I compare that to a property that also has good photography, and let's just see one. This will be very embarrassing if this isn't the case.
This is one of our investors.
Oh, okay. So I'm looking at one of our investors, and can you see how the lights are turned on in the house?
And good photography.
And that makes it, we'll come to the good photography, but let's focus on the lights first. The lights make it good photography because it makes the space lighter compared to all of these shadows. And of course, it looks like...
Look at the curtains. The curtains just look a bit old. It looks like they've replaced the carpet not so long ago, but the curtains just look old.
Yeah, and especially those light fittings. They're so 80s. So a couple of things that...
The stars on the top of the roof. Did you have these when you were a kid?
Yeah, so what you can see there is that you've got those glow-in-the-dark things on the roof, like
the stars. And galactic systems that you'd stick to the roof with blue tack and then they'd fall off in the middle of the night.
I used to think I was so cool having those. But do you know what this has actually made me think? So this property is renting for $610 a week. It's been empty for about 8 weeks. So the property investor has lost out on almost $5,000 worth of rent. And I've just been thinking, would it have been a much better use of money if they were to take that $5,000 that they've missed out on, effectively spent, and use that money to paint the walls, get rid of that wallpaper potentially, or just paint over it and replace the light fittings and maybe the curtains. That would have meant that they could charge more for the house, and on top of that, they would have got a tenant much, much more quickly. And so I think those are the main reasons I think this property is just not renting, because it's not up to standard. It's not good enough, especially when a renter could spend $80 more, in this instance, get a new build down the road, which is
much nicer.
significantly nicer. And so that's why I'm thinking this property is probably not renting. Next, we're going to come to one that I have found in Hamilton. Now, this is a 6-bedroom property, and it's in an excellent location. It is, let me show you this, Andrew. It is right next to, here's the property here, and this is the University of Waikato.
So you're walking distance from the university.
Yeah, so I used to live here actually when I went to Waikato.
When you're blocked in your friend.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it'd be a 5-minute walk to the university, which makes me think, why isn't this property renting? What are some things that you're picking up?
So this is the interesting thing here. So the property looks like it's in pretty good nick. It seems like it's a reasonably good value rental property. The photography's okay again. Like, they probably could have done a better job with some of that photography. But, it's probably quite fine for a student looking for accommodation. The biggest issue here was that the listing was launched on about mid-November. 16th of November.
So this has been on TradeMe for about 3.5 months.
Here's the problem though. The property wasn't available until February 10th, so only a few weeks ago. So it was advertised way earlier than it was actually available. And the problem with this is your listing goes stale. People see it and they think, no, that's not right for me, and then they just brush past it. Then as time goes on, people think, well, that's been on there for ages, and they kind of just think there must be something wrong with it. Same when you're selling a property. You don't want this listing to go stale.
I think the other thing is that if you're somebody searching on TradeMe, one of the first things you're going to go do, and this is in Hamilton East, is you're going to say, show me featured first, or show me the latest listings.
Yes.
And if your property is available now, but actually it was listed 3.5 months ago, this is going to be on page 3 of 3 in that instance. And of course, people can search through all of them, but it's going to be so much further down. So I am surprised that it hasn't rented, because it's actually a good price. Works out about $130 per room. And I would have expected that students would snap at this, because it is actually pretty good for a student.
Someone needs to just rent the whole thing and then rent out the other rooms at $200 a room.
Well, what I think they should do is probably relaunch the listing. If it was me, I'd take it down and I'd just put it back up. Yeah, you could take some better photos. You could turn the lights on when you are taking those photos. You could make sure that they're landscape photos rather than portrait. You can see that a property manager has got it with their phone and done it selfie style, so taking portrait photos, which often don't look the best when you're clicking through on TradeMe.
When you cheap out on things like that and you're listing, so an owner of this will be thinking, I don't want to relaunch it because I don't want to pay the whatever it is, couple of $100 to relist it. Just pay the $200, because every week that you wait for a new tenant, it's costing you essentially the $780, was it? Ridiculous. You just need to get some good photos, relaunch it, and then get someone in there as soon as possible.
One thing that I do think they've done good on this one's 11A Beaumont Street, for anybody who wants to check it out or maybe rent it, because that would help out the landlord, is that, where is it?
Use your code, OPUS15.
One of the things that I think they've done quite well is they do have a featured listing though. So that means that when people go straight to TradeMe, it's going to be nearer the top. But I do think that they've got a bit of work to do here. Let's come to property number 3, and this one is in Dunedin City. So this is a 4-bedroom property right in the middle of town. It is right near the Octagon, I believe. Let's take a look at this map, Andrew. Where's the Octagon?
It's pretty close.
Octagon's over here.
It's walking distance.
It's on the main street. Really good. I'm surprised this one hasn't gone either, because the trouble is, I look at these, I'm like, these are great properties. Why aren't they renting? But the main issue with this, and it's so obvious, there is only a single photo, and it's of the outside of the property.
Now, that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what the state is on the inside. And having seen quite a few Dunedin flats, it probably is not a bad thing. But it doesn't give you a good idea of the size of the rooms or the layout of the property. Or, that could be a sexy apartment above a store. It could be quite cool.
But the issue is, even if it was grotty as anything, Andrew, the sort of people who are going to be willing to rent something that isn't perhaps as nice are going to be people who are willing to rent that anyway. Just by not putting photos up there doesn't mean that you're any more likely to be like, I'm going to go see this. Oh, oh, okay, it's a bit grotty. That doesn't matter. I'm going to rent it.
Plus, you surely want to weed out the people that don't want to actually live in there.
Well, I think the other thing is that if you were somebody searching through on TradeMe, what are you going to do? You're going to scroll through and you can flick through on the search results. You can flick through photos. So it's very easy to quickly get a sense of what sort of properties you are looking at. Now, if you come across something that's only got one photo and it's the outside, my question is, are you really so inclined to be like, well, I'm going to look more closely at this property, or are you going to go and look at ones that have photos? Like, you're just way more likely because that's what people are like. Similarly, I do think that this property was launched way too early. So again, it was listed on the 30th of September, but it wasn't available for 5 months later, 4.5 months later in mid-February. And I think, again, you might think, well, what does it matter? It's still on there. Well, here we've got 2 properties that have been on there for a long time and haven't been renting. Sure, this property's only been empty for perhaps 2 weeks, but I do think
empty.
It could have been rented much more quickly. I think the other thing that's terrible is that when it was launched, the property manager from the rent shop has said more photos coming soon, and there are no photos on there. Now, look, I'm not blaming the property manager because perhaps there are some things that we can't see. We're just looking on TradeMe, but I think the landlord is missing out because they haven't put photos on there.
It's interesting that both of those properties are probably more likely suitable for students, and they're advertised much earlier. So from what I understand with student accommodation, what will happen is often you might rent them out for 10-month periods, particularly in Dunedin, and then you have that vacancy. So this might be the way that property managers try and deal with that vacancy to advertise them early, but it's obviously not working.
So the last property that I want to look at, and this is quite a different one, is a property on 20 School Road. It's a 3-bedroom property in Taitapu, which is in Selwyn District in Canterbury. Now, it's $550 per week, and it's an older house. But do you know what, Andrew? The photos are not terrible.
They're not bad.
Not bad. It's not the worst house. I think people could be quite comfortable here, even though the property would be, a couple of decades old.
For $550 a week, it's pretty reasonable as well. How many bedrooms was that? 3 beds.
Three bedrooms.
The bathroom looks pretty new. Looks like that's been renovated.
But here's the thing. It was listed early January, and it was available on the 8th of January. So that has still been empty for, call it 7 to 8 weeks, and yes, they are using a property manager. So what is it about this property, do you think, is making it not be rented? What is it that means that this landlord's not had a tenant for 7, potentially 8 weeks?
Well, I think the issue is Taitap has a relatively small population of 624 people. So it is. It's not far from town in Christchurch, but it probably attracts a certain type of person that maybe has their kids in the school out there. You've got a much more limited tenant pool, so probably that's the issue if I were to guess.
So I've run the numbers on this. How many households do you think rent in the Taitapu area?
As a percentage?
No, total number of people who rent.
I'm going to go with, only because you're asking and now I'm thinking it must be a low number, 200?
45.
45?
So there are 45 households who rent in this area. The home ownership rate is extraordinarily high. Only about 11.7%. I say about 11.7. It is 11.7. Only 11.7% of households rent in this area, which means that, and actually I'll show you, this is the only property that is available in the Taitapu area. Now, this is a fine house. There's nothing wrong with it. I wouldn't be sitting here suggesting you renovate it, but the issue is that you are operating in a market where there just aren't that many people looking for rental properties. And so if you were going to rent this out, and let's say it wasn't somebody moving from a different part of Canterbury, you are needing one of those other 45 people who rent, 45 households who rent, to move into your property and happen to be looking for your specific one.
Do you know, if I were advertising this, it's probably not the perfect thing to do. I'd probably get told off for someone for doing this, but I'd advertise this under Rolleston so that people looking in Rolleston saw that, and then I'd put this in Taitap.
Dodgy Andrew Nicol.
Oh, it's nothing wrong with that because it's close enough to Rolleston or Lincoln.
Let me ask you this. Would you potentially have 2 listings, perhaps one
Yeah, that's
in Rolleston
absolutely. I do both.
and another one in Taitapu,
Yes,
just
yes.
in case you've got somebody looking for that.
Yes, because I don't think that many people would even think to click on TyTap. I think you'd click Rolleston and then you think, oh, well, that's actually very cheap. It's in TyTap. It's only another 10-minute drive. Let's go there.
Because if we're looking at
Lincoln?
at the distance, it's probably closer to Lincoln.
Yeah, Lincoln. Okay, all right. Well, I'm not Captain Cook. I'm just giving you an example.
Yeah, but yes, my point here is that you could put it under there and be in Taitapu as well. I mean, knowing you, you'd probably
I put Horswell as well.
I thought-
I put Lower Horswell.
I'd be about to say you'd say Christchurch Central. Somebody look at that, $550 for a 3-bedroom house in Christchurch Central. What great value. So that's a couple of things you could potentially do. So hopefully this has been useful. If you are renting out a property and you're thinking, I'm struggling to get a tenant, there are often things you can do in order to speed up that process. And there are some instances where property investors in New Zealand are making mistakes that are leaving those properties untenanted for an extra couple of weeks than what you'd actually like. Right, let's wrap it up there, but please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Really does help us get the message out to more people. And hey, if you are thinking about building a long-term plan for your investments, then you need to check out our new software. It's called My Wealth Plan, and it is the companion software for our book called Wealth Plan. You can access this for free at mywealthplan.opuspartners.co.nz or just tap or swipe over the cover art. Links down in the description. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Tim Knight.
I'm Andrew Nicol.
We're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the New Zealand property market. Until next time.